He is a godless Zimbabwean. He used to be a Christian like myself. And he's a writer as well. He's a fantastic writer, and he does a lot of awareness with issues in Africa. And he's lived in South Africa and Zimbabwe, obviously his home country. And he's also spent time in Zambia, so he knows the country well there as well. Because Zambia and Zimbabwe were, we used to be one area before we were split. And we also he's traveling now, writing and freelancing around the world. So it's really good to have you here tonight. And I think Takuto's got a really good broad spectrum knowledge of things that he always on the group, I know on the private group as well, lots of interesting points and conversations and things brought up there. So I'm proud to have Takudzwa as a Zimbabwean, because it's just a reflection of the wonderful Zimbabwean people and the insight and the intelligence and the good writing skills and all that. The Zimbabweans are just amazing. I mean, we were one of the most literate countries in Africa. And I mean, it's continued pretty much like that. And I grew up with the most amazing Zimbabwean people. And it was actually a Zimbabwean man who taught me to write and develop stories and that when I was very little. I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that a black person had helped me learning how to spell and write and develop stories and things separately from my schoolwork. So it's really wonderful. And we had a Zimbabwean here on the show last week, so I feel really at home. I don't feel so out on my own anymore. So Takudzwa, you can just tell us about obviously growing up in Zimbabwe. It's very, very Christian country. It always was. I was at school there. I was born into Zimbabwe when it was still under colonial rule, and everything was based on Christianity. Your whole life was just run around the church. I've noticed over the years since I've left that it's become, the churches have just suddenly spread. It's almost become like a cultish thing almost. There seem to just be churches everywhere and everyone is involved with religion, and it's just almost to the extreme. From me on the outside now looking in, it seems very more prevalent than it was growing up there when I grew up there as a child in the 70s and the 80s, and it's just... So tell us a bit about that and a bit about the religion and the schools in that, because I know our education system was based, really the foundation was built on the religious, the Christian Bible, and everything was to do with God and church and your whole communities and everything. It was very oppressive as well, because we had our segregated schooling, and the whites went to the nice schools in the nice suburbs with the nice facilities and the teachers that were paid well, and they were taught a higher level of education than the black students who went mostly to mission schools, which were run by missionaries on farms and in rural areas, run by the churches and that as well. And they were given a very substandard level of education compared to someone like myself and Takudzwa at the same age would have been given different education systems, which is absolutely shocking. And we also completed school for a few years longer, and the whole system was being built on religion to raise the white people up and to suppress black people so that they would grow up to believe that they could only be laborers and serve the white people. It was shocking. So when we got our independence, obviously that was a really good thing, because all those laws dropped straight away. And I remember we had lots of black children coming into our school, and it was wonderful. But it's very difficult in those days because you had to live in a certain area to attend a certain school. And because of segregation laws, black people were forced to live in outside rural areas. So they could only go to these schools that weren't as well developed and equipped. And that was all run by the churches, a lot of Catholic churches and that there. So that's sort of my background to that. And then Takudzwa can just let us know how it is there today with how the churches have gone forward from that time.
Thank you, Lynda. That's a good one. That's a good one. Just a minute. Welcome everyone again. Thank you, Chaku, our brother from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, now in the Philippines. My name is Kato Mukasa, and with my sister Lynda, we shall be having this great discussion today. We are expecting a guest from Uganda, and we shall be joined by more others. Tonight, we are going to look at Africa again, and we are looking at an assessment of the impact of religion on Africa. And our focus was 3 countries: Uganda, which is my motherland, Zambia, and then South Africa. So welcome again. I shall hand it back to Lynda, who is going to be moderating much of this discussion today. And we're happy to have you, Taku, on set. So welcome again, everyone, and let us have it roll. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Yes, Takutra. So, yes, you can start off and tell us a bit about yourself and explain to us about how your life was growing up there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lynda. Thank you, Kato. I'm glad to be here and to share my perspective and experiences with religion in Zimbabwe and in other African countries I've lived, like my experience with religion in general. I wrote a book that I published a year ago, and there is a chapter in there titled "The Dead Jew," and it explains a lot of that experience in a comedic way, but pretty much like highlights on all of my insights on it. But to reiterate, and I might have added on a few experiences since then. I was born in post-colonial Zimbabwe, like 1992. We were called the Born Frees, born after Zimbabwe became independent. Unlike Lynda was born during the Rhodesian times, but I was born in the newly independent. Yeah. So I was born to 2 educators. My mother was a teacher. My mother is still a teacher. My father was also like a teacher. So I was born into a family that reads a lot. There was a library in the house. There's still a library in the house. And
wonderful.
Yeah, and there was also a form of education or another. But just like Kato earlier on told me that he was born Catholic and he was raised Catholic. I was also born into a very Catholic household. I was baptized when I was still a baby, and I remember Sundays just like, going to church and seeing that dead statue of Jesus Christ on the cross. It was very gory, but yeah, that's what the whole Dead Jew chapter was about. Like that image you have to see every Sunday, and then it has to get ingrained in your brain, and you grow up with that. So yeah, I was very much indoctrinated from childhood. Whenever I asked existential questions or questions to do with worldview, it always boiled down to Christianity. The Bible says this, the Bible said that. Of course, it was not like the whole picture. So, and I was a very curious mind. I remember this other time when I was like in grade 1. I like, it was the first time I think I'd become like a really like affluent reader. So there was this day I decided to take the initiative to read the whole Bible myself. I went through the first few pages and they were talking about weird names I've never heard of and stories that seemed like that were like too repetitive and boring for my 7-year-old attention span. And I quit after like the first chapter or so. But then as time went on, I learned a lot more about religion. I went to catechist school. I think Kato would know that as well, having been raised Catholic.
Yeah,
and
I do.
I went to catechist school. I passed with shining colors. I was so proud the first time I had that Eucharist. And I also went to a Catholic school. It was a it was a boarding school. Like it was at the time, it was the best academic powerhouse in Zimbabwe, Maris Nyanga Boys High. It was very prestigious. it was the same group of schools that the then president Robert Mugabe also landed, and his sons also landed there. So it was like an academic powerhouse that everyone wanted to go to. So a lot of Catholics and non-Catholics attended this school. And you find that like there are also people who went to Pentecostal churches and other different kind of churches. So it became interesting because like it was mandatory for us to do the rosary, Catholic traditions and stuff. But it didn't sit well with other people because they were coming from the Seventh-day Adventist or other Pentecostal churches. And it was interesting to hear the harsh criticisms of the church in the hostel. And then I was a big Catholic church defender back then. Like, no, but we are the first religion. We are the first brand of Christianity. We are always right and stuff. I remember there was a Seventh Adventist guy I used to debate with a lot. And I would debate for Catholicism. And he would debate about his perspective of things. Everything around us was religion, and back then I didn't see anything wrong with it because I was raised in it. My whole community, like everything around me, was immersed in religion, such that it was. I remember the first time I saw an atheist was on a TV program, and there was this white Zimbabwean who was an atheist, and he was a panelist on this show. And then my mom called me. My mom was my mother was in the dining room that day. And then he was like, hey, come see this guy. He doesn't believe in God. And then I was like, no way, what? And then I went there and said, I was like, oh, this guy is crazy. So, yeah, like I never imagined I would ever end up in his position. I was like, yo, this guy is definitely going to hell. So,
yeah,
and I remember. and I remember like even the education when we were in school, we were taught by this sect of clergy called the Marist Brothers. So there were Catholic clergy and they had weird ways of disciplining children. Like for instance, there was study time after supper, and if you were caught making noise when one of those Marist brothers was on duty to monitor the students, they would invite you for a cup of tea. And a cup of tea usually meant that you would go into their residence, you'd strip down naked, which was weird. And then you'd lie down on your belly. And then they would can you.
And that's the cup of tea.
It was, at the time, we didn't see anything wrong with that. But now as an adult, I look back and then I think like, okay, what was that? So,
wow.
And I think we still do it. So, I remember the first time we were taught about such a scientific fact like evolution. The first time we were taught about that chapter, like it was a Marist brother who was teaching us that. And they taught us with a disclaimer. I mean, evolution is a scientific fact, right? Like antibiotics have been made out of what we know about evolution. We even have gene editing technology because of evolution. And but when it was a disclaimer. They said, no, it's just a theory. Otherwise, we are Christians. We believe Adam and Eve. We believe there was a talking snake in a garden. We believe this, right? So you find that a lot of people don't get the scientific literacy they should be getting because they are being taught with religious attitude like that. So yeah, like I was just as much a Christian because of childhood indoctrination. I was born into a Catholic family, and it was all like very like real to me. I even went for all those after school Christian clubs, praying in tongues and all that stuff. As a Catholic, I was not supposed to pray in tongues, but I kind of caught on to the Pentecostal way. And after, like, I remember I used to fast for like
Fast.
whole days. Like, yeah, like I used to do all those rituals like fasting. I remember this time I fasted a very long time, such that I almost fainted. And when I finally had to eat, I could feel it was a biscuit. But I remember I could feel it go down my throat because my throat almost closed up. It was an unhealthy lifestyle, but I was thinking like, yo, I'm doing the right thing for, you know. And then another thing about me is that I was very fascinated in history. Most people who usually use the religion, they do so because of science, because of they understand scientific facts, and then they say, yeah, so God can be true.
Yeah.
For me, it's history. Every time I was in the library, it will probably be a history book. I'll be learning about different histories from different cultures, and I was also very fascinated with that. Even like my favorite place to go when I was back home, and every city I go to actually is a museum because I like learning about the past so that I understand where a society is coming from and where it is going. So I decided to follow up on the history of Christianity, right? And because I was so enthusiastic about this endeavor. Unlike my like back when I was in grade one, when I decided to read the Bible, this time I was really actually very patient to say, okay, let me just go through Christian history and everything.
Sorry.
So I went. I think by the time I was 16, I knew the complete history of how Christianity came to be. And it was so clear that this was a man-made thing, right? It was so clear that there were so many more religions before that. And it was so clear that like religion is something that came with the agricultural revolution. For the greater part of human history, humans were hunters and gatherers, and they didn't necessarily have organized religion like that. And the time scales that I learned in history, it kind of made me question the whole 6,000 years Adam and Eve thing, because humans have been around 200,000 years, which means God created Adam after the Sumerians invented glue. That didn't make sense. And yes, all those facts like hit me, but still, I was religious because of all that conditioning and indoctrination and the society around me. So I thought, yeah, maybe like the teachers say these are just theories, but I was like, it was such a conflict. So, but then when I was in my advanced levels, I decided to take divinity, which was like an in-depth or like theology for high schoolers as a subject. I also took history and literature, which I was also like really good at. And yeah, I learned more about the Bible and its philosophy in context. And when I did this, my doubts even deepened. I started to see parallels between African traditional religions, because we also studied that when we were doing divinity, and Old Testament Christianity, or Old Testament Judaism. And then I started because I had a lowly opinion of African traditional religion, obviously, because I was raised to believe like this was, uh, you know, like an evil religion. Seeing those similarities, seeing those same patterns, I think that's when the anthropologist in me came out. I started to see those similarities in human behaviors and cultures, and it became more of a myth for me, like to see that humans created this. But then I guess by that time I was agnostic, but I was still sort of believing in a higher power, if you could call it that. I still went to church, but I would always debate with others at church. Like, okay, this doesn't make sense and stuff. But I think people around me still believing in a religion still made me like be in it. And then it was just before my last year in university when I came across a video of Dan Barker. He is the president for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And it was talking about morality in the Bible. And then it resonated so much with me. He was going through the philosopher Arthur C. Clarke's points about morality and religion. And it all resonated with me so well, such that I started to question everything about Christianity. And then like, this is how I came to discover the science side of it. I started like, I stumbled into Richard Dawkins, and I remember like I just went to read his books about the Blind Watchmaker and the God Delusion, and then I started like reading a lot more. It just inspired me to read a lot more, and then before I knew it, like I was an atheist. I just lost the belief altogether. And then when I started talking more about it, I discovered, no, there are many more people who were atheists around me. So like I was an intern at an organization back then. I started casually talking about these issues while doing field work in one of our wards one day. And then my boss, I discovered that my boss was also an atheist, and it was like, huh, okay. So this is when I started maybe thinking critically about religion. And there was one thing about these words we're going to. There's this African Apostolic Church. I think Lynda might know some of them, like the Apostoli, those people who wear the white garments. Some of them are Paul Nwaja, some of them are John Masowe, some of them are John Marange. Well, these people, their cult, their church is more like a cult. I mean, they have.
I just cult is showing my Microsoft. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
they are like a cult. Yes.
Cult, right? Yeah, and these people like are the majority in Zimbabwe, like because like the rural population is 70% in Zimbabwe, and then these people are like the biggest denomination there. So they are a force to be reckoned with. Like even the ruling party in Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF, kind of appeases them so that, you know, they get votes. So these people do child marriages, like 11-year-old brides, the whole shabam. And they are polygamous. So you find this 40-year-old guy with many wives, as many as 15, as long as he's wealthy. Them are 11-year-old brides. And they don't allow medical care. Yes, 11 years. You find 11-year-old pregnant girls. Yeah. They
it's shocking. I remember you telling us it's nothing more than pedophilia, actually, which is just being hidden behind the religion. It's just horrific.
Well, like it's no secret in Zimbabwe. Everyone knows about it, but because it's their religious beliefs, and you know, because the government appeases them, because the moment their leaders endorse a presidential candidate, they have more chances of winning the election because the whole congregation follows. And we actually had this member of parliament endorsed by the ruling party, who was part of the ruling party, actually pushed for the age of consent in parliament to be 12 years old. So that the government gets, yeah, actually in parliament, so that like they get support from these guys. Right now, like the elections next year in Zimbabwe, and these people like now even have like the president started they call it an apostolate for ED, like the current president. He even wore the garments and everything, so that, you know, they just even during the COVID lockdown, while whole country was like locked down, these people were allowed to go and have a conference with thousands of people, just because the government doesn't want to upset them and they don't believe in medicals, you know, in places where there are a lot of them, you find children still dying of measles.
They don't believe in
HIV.
any. That's terrible, really terrible.
They say it's a lack of faith, and in my hometown Mutare, there is this sort of like village turned town because of them, called Zimunya, and they have a shrine where they kind of put a dead woman in a glass. She used to be a prophetess, I think, and they go for a pilgrimage to pray to her or like touch a glass. I can imagine kids watching that dead body in a glass all the time. It's kind of really weird stuff, yeah. So that's one of the issues I started noticing. Before that, before I became an atheist, it was not as obvious. It was just like, I know my post story and they have their way of life. But after becoming an atheist, I started to question the whole ethics behind it. And yeah, like you also find that the average Zimbabwean has a theocratic mindset. Like they follow leaders who are more religious. Even the opposition leader in Zimbabwe right now, he calls himself a pastor. He wears his religion on his sleeve so that he gets the support of people. People also like as a historian, I would know that like religion or Christianity in Zimbabwe is a result of the acculturation process by the London Missionary Society. They use this as a way to do the whole process of acculturation. They wanted to control the public opinion and perspective of native Zimbabweans, and in quotes, civilize them. And Christianity is what they used to do that. And this is why, like, even the Bible was the only book that was translated into our local languages. The important books that were in the important books that had helped their civilization like become what it is today, like Isaac Newton or Plato, they never translated any of that. So you get today you get a Zimbabwe that's a post-independent democratic Zimbabwe that doesn't know the principles of a democracy because that is low, because the idea of civilization that they brought to them was the Bible. And it's ironic because Europe had already undergone enlightenment when they colonized us, right? They had already gone under enlightenment, and the Bible was no longer the center of their like civilization,
constitutions and everything, and yeah.
But still, they just brought missionaries to be in charge of the civilization process, and I think that did a huge dent in.
It's huge damage.
Yeah, exactly. So scientific literacy is low because of that, and civic awareness is also very low. It actually enables dictators like Mnangagwa, to have their way and have the votes they need, because all they have to do is like few religious leaders so that they get their way. But then, like, Zimbabwe is an interesting case, though, because I remember when I became an atheist, I became very vocal about it. I started going into all these online debates and everything, and because of that, I stumbled on a group Zimbabweans of they call themselves active citizens, but I've since left this group because it has people who don't share the same values as I do. It was called the Society of Eagles. these people, like what I would call secularists, but they are not humanists. They are very right wing. So by then I didn't know right wing. like um I joined them. Like they do volunteer discussions and debates, and one of them was actually linked to the Zimbabwean government at the time. Shinga Indoro. He was a very connected person. Oh yeah, he's a businessman, and because he's well acquainted with the business, he was connected with all those in power and everything. He even knew Mugabe and his family personally. So he took a liking to my religious debates, and then he introduced us to the then education minister, who was Lazarus Dokora at the time. And we had an interesting discussion about how schools were very religious, yet the Zimbabwean constitution is very secular. So it's like the constitution is very secular, but then the people are not. The people are very religious. So the government doesn't talk about it, but they know that the people won't read the constitution either. Such that, like in Zimbabwe, if you are to go to the authorities or to press the issue legally as a secularist, you're going to win the case easily. But it doesn't seem that way because the society, it's like an illusion. So Shinga Indoro
like so many of our constitutions.
Yes, Shinga Indoro had actually taken the initiative upon him to actually pursue this personally. So we went to see the minister, and the minister was actually doing an interesting policy that time. He banned prayer in schools, and he wanted to reform the curriculum to say, like, religious education shouldn't be about proselytization, but teaching about religion, which was actually very progressive. And
yeah, it was.
He asked me to write a few articles in the national newspaper explaining his policies, because obviously the backlash came to the minister saying, no, he's a Satanist. Some saying he's a Muslim terrorist. He's linked to Al Qaeda. And then I had to debunk all those myths in the national newspaper, and I wrote a very article for the big Sunday newspaper called the Sunday Mail, called like fighting extremism, a response. Couldn't argue with that, so the issue just hashed down. But it got us invited to a national radio discussion, about religion. It was called Faith on Trial, and it was sponsored by some Christian organization. There had never been atheists on this show. It's ironically called Faith on Trial, but it's always just about Christians talking about their issues. So the government actually pushed for us to be on that show, which is also very ironic, because it's the same government that goes and gets support from this Mapo story I was talking about earlier. Because Mugabe also used to do that. He also used to wear those white pants and go there and all that stuff. But yeah, his people just put us on that show. And we went there, and I think the first episode of that show, Christians were not prepared. It was actually shocking. Most of them were shocked. Some of them tried debating, but they realized they didn't know much. Calls were coming into the radio station like, hey, who are these people? Where did you get these people from?
I can imagine.
And, yeah, it was crazy, but our arguments were solid. The second week, we were there for 6 weeks. The second week, people were calling in. And in the end, it actually made a difference. I remember the calls we got the first day and the calls we got like in the third week or something. People were actually learning stuff, and yeah, we actually like broke through, and I think that's when I discovered that discussing about these things on national platforms like this and everything, it actually helps break the bond that religion has, or the yoke that religion has put on Africans. And I
Yes.
remember on the fourth week we actually had traditional people or traditional healers and spirit mediums actually join us as well. And there were interesting discussions, and it actually became a really good secular exercise. But I think in the sixth week, because and the show's ratings were at an all-time high. But
That's fantastic.
what happened though was that the Christian sponsors were not happy that their religion had been cited. So they told us that like they had to get these atheists out. And I remember the last episode was more like the presenter kind of consoling us that we were right, but being apologetic about Christianity, and we were like, okay. We were then invited to another more private radio station called Capital to continue this conversation. But by that time, I had gone to South Africa, and I think the society was it's all the whole right wing because the Zimbabwean secular community. That's because a few of them are liberals, but most of them are very right wing, and they are very like we do it ourselves kind of thing. They are exclusionary. They wouldn't want to talk about or to taint their secularist image with issues about human rights and any of that stuff. And then when I went to South Africa, I lived in a predominantly Afrikaner community. I'm sure Lynda knows the community I'm talking, the Western Cape.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's very, very, very bad.
They're very racist, everything, but
Extremely
I really admire them because they were very secular. So I like it. It felt okay, like living amongst secularists for a while, and I actually met a lot of people from many different parts of the world while I was there, because there was a sailing community, like people who sail around the world and then they come and dock there. And I also remember, like, I met this Taiwanese guy called Danny Huang. And Taiwan is a very atheist country. Like, they don't have religion as a big part of their of their worldview. I used to tell him about all the stories about people hunting witches, and I even showed him a newspaper article from Zimbabwe about one of our prophets catching a vampire, and he thought this was all like stuff from the old. Yeah, and South Africa was a really eye-opener to me. That
people, Europeans, with witchcraft and that in Africa, they can't believe it's still happening here.
Oh yeah, and for someone coming from Taiwan, it's like they don't even have religion in their country, and then to learn that there are people who have this in national newspapers was shocking for him. And
still today, exactly.
Exactly. So when I was in South Africa, I actually got to learn about the different perspectives about religion. Like their religion is a lot different. They are not fundamentalists like Zimbabweans are. Religion that they do as maybe a tradition to say, okay, we're just going to church on Sunday, but nothing too serious, you know. Let's not think about it. It's just something we do. And otherwise, they live their lives as if there was no religion, especially the Afrikaners that I lived amongst. And it gave me a whole different perspective, like, people can be like this. And it even got more interesting when I came to the Philippines. Most Filipinos are Catholics, but they're not homophobic. They are very scientific when they think about stuff like evolution. And I was talking to Kato about this earlier, actually. And yeah, like it got me wondering, like, why are Catholics here accepting of LGBTQ people? And
I was
why
just
do
going to
they
ask,
accept?
why the difference?
Like, why do they like accept evolution as a fact? And then I realized that Pope John Paul II, back when he was still the Pope, before his passing, he declared evolution a fact. And Pope Francis also like apologized to gay people like a few years back. But the Philippines had actually been the Filipino Catholics had actually been accepting gay people way before that. And I realized it's because of religious relativism. It was also happened in Europe, but it's because like religion has to adapt to the culture around it in order to stay relevant.
Yes.
So in the Philippines, before Pope Francis apologized to gay people, their culture has been way accepting of gay, lesbians, and transsexuals way before. So Catholics here had always been accepting of that. The same goes for Europe with science and everything, right? But like I made the calculation and I realized that back when we were taught evolution with a disclaimer when I was in high school, Pope John Paul had already made that declaration that evolution is a fact. But we were still taught that, you know, it's just a theory. The talking snake is real.
Still to this
It's
day,
because,
actually, in many places.
oh yeah. So I realized that it's because that the Catholic Church in Africa didn't find a need to do the relativism or the progress. They just go with the culture. Africans like this, so we just go with that. Africans don't like gay people, so we just go with that. So yeah, like I realized that religion and culture are very much entwined, and religion tries to absorb the culture around it to become relevant. To actually place like which one influences which. Of course, it's clear now that culture influences religion more than religion influences culture. But then it's also clear that the culture that we have is also heavily influenced by religion. And I think these dynamics play differently in different places. Because in Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, you find that religion actually influences culture a lot. I've been reading the news about Kenya and the new government that's praying and banning LGBTQ movies and everything is because they are religious purists. And the whole concept of homophobia itself was brought to Africa by missionaries. Otherwise, if you look at our history, something I also knew, like being a history nerd, was we had gay kings, we had lesbian queens, we had people were accepting of gay people before the missionaries came with their acculturation too and made Africans homophobic. we didn't have that culture of hate. But
No,
today, it's Africans would give, would attribute gay rights to Europe. Say, oh, those are Europeans with a gay agenda. But before colonization, it's actually the Europeans who brought the homophobia, the European missionaries who brought the homophobia and everything. And you find that that's because of religion. That's because of the accusation tool that was used. And I think what sets Africa like apart from Europe or the Philippines or Singapore or Taiwan, which is like what I've learned in this area, is that in Taiwan or in the Philippines or in Singapore or even in Europe, religion was not used as an acculturation tool. That's the big difference. Religion is something.
Observation. Yeah.
Yeah. Like religion is just something that's in their history. Some of them, like if you go to Europe, some of the churches are even museums now. In Norway, Sweden, like people used to believe in this. But in so they were at liberty. Even religion had to like make compromises to say now we are doing gay marriages, now we are accepting evolution, because they wanted to stay relevant. But then you see that in Africa, because religion was used as an acculturation tool, it's like very much linked to what we like the culture it created during colonization. It's at the heart of the neocolonial mindset. You find like I was saying earlier, our colonization from Europe could have been an opportunity to get the ideas of the Enlightenment, to get the ideas of Voltaire, of Immanuel Kant, of Isaac Newton, of Faraday, all of that. But instead, it was the missionaries who led the civilizing process. And we caught the ideas of the Dark Ages instead.
We did.
They didn't send their scientists or philosophers to civilize us. They sent their missionaries to civilize us. And it's not to say we're not civilized. We already
that's the whole thing.
In our own. Yeah, we already in our own process of civilization. Of course, some of the places in Africa had issues. Like I know, for instance, Zimbabwe had issues. When we were colonized, we were actually like the Shona people were actually like living under oppression from the Ndebele people, because like I am Ndau myself. Ndau people were actually a faction of the Nguni people who came in from South Africa, and my grandfather was actually one of the generals. I discovered that like he called Ndaba Zinduna, and he's actually like one of the oppressed local people, and they would do raids. They would just pillage villages and raid villages, kill the men, take their women, stuff like that. It was very. It was a dark era in Zimbabwe by the time we colonized. So you get a lot of you get a lot of white people justifying colonization, saying, but Shonas were suffering even more oppression from the Ndebeles. Even when the British first colonized us, the reason why they later on colonized the Ndebele was because the Ndebeles were still coming into the British colony and killing Shona people in broad daylight. And the British were like, oh no, we have to stop this savagery. But it was just that point in history, and it was a result of years of enslavement from Portuguese Brazeiros. They were like these Portuguese people who had came like 400 years before, and they were enslaving Africans. that disenfranchised the Mutapa Empire, and that was there before that and stuff. But yeah, we had our problems here and there. We also had like slavery issues in West Africa and everything, but our culture was evolving. Yeah,
the culture was kept
and
pretty much intact to a degree when it was just amongst our own people. But it's when the colonialists came here and started putting laws into place, like banning polygamy, limiting the number of cattle that a man could have, which is your wealth in Africa is your cattle, restricting your areas, stealing land and saying you can't graze there. They even had laws in Zimbabwe to do with not being able to brew your own beer at home and drink your own beer in your own home, which, as you know, is very much a part of culture and tradition. And the polygamy as well. So every single aspect, I mean, to take away a man's cattle or to limit the number of cattle that you can have is one of the greatest, most insulting things you can do that can strip a man to complete poverty, because there's so much wealth and the cattle are held in such high regard. To have Europeans come in who don't know that, they think it's barbaric because you slaughter an animal for a sacrifice, or they think it's sinful because a man has 5 wives. But if you actually look into each reason why things were done, they made perfect sense and they worked. So it was a cultural thing, like you said, Kuzwa, that was just completely destroyed, which is what we still today are faced with, and we had religion put in our faces, like that was all taken away, and then you're just given religion. And it's what I always say, it's not to say that the African people were not primitive or barbaric. Just because we spoke differently and because of our climate, we wore maybe animal skins and we lived in different houses that stayed cooler and we ate more red meat that we had to hunt for than fishing in Europe. You can't look at another culture and say they're barbaric just because they're different to you. We were actually highly advanced in ways that really matter in life, like knowing how to hunt and knowing how to tell weather patterns and how to survive. It's the things at the end of the day that are going to be the survival of the human species, are the things that we as Africans have always had. Surviving as a human species one day is not going to be what university degrees you've got, or how many instruments you can play and paintings you can paint and culture that you've got. So I think we were very highly advanced at the time. I mean, we had no diseases or any issues and things, which were all brought here, as you know. So it's really a catch-22. Who gets to decide and define what culture is? Who gets to say that's culture and that's not? And we've got it and you haven't. Just because you're different people, have been brought up in a different climate, different environment, different experiences in life, it's just so wrong, and now unfortunately it's become so much part of who we are. We judge other people because of that as well now. I mean, subconsciously we judge people because of the way they do things, because it's not our way. We think that it's wrong. It's the same as the religious. Just because you don't believe in a God or you believe in a different God to me, you're wrong and I'm right. We don't have that right as people to make those decisions for other people. But I just think that what you said as well is that it's really quite scary in a way that you see the Western world is pulling away from religion. It's not even you can go to weddings and funerals and that there, and it's all secular. There's no God or Bible or anything. But yet we seem to be getting more and more extreme in Africa. It is spreading and spreading and spreading. And we've got the jihadist Islamic side of it. And then I also see in like West Africa, the Pentecostal churches are getting all sorts of money rituals and sacrifice and coming there for demonic, to pray all the demons, exorcisms and witchcraft and pastors preaching about witches and that. And where does it end? It's almost like, to me, that side of Christianity with the witchcraft and the money rituals and sacrifices is the extreme version of Christianity, like we see the extreme version of Islam with the jihadists, that the beheading and all that. They're allowed to get away with it in the name of their religion. We now see the exact same thing happening with the Christian religion, where it's getting extreme, because I, like you, was raised as a Christian, and there was never any of that in the foundations of what they taught at the time about rituals and sacrificing and witches and things like that. That's something that's been brought in. And I also wonder whether it's come in over the years because we had all our history and everything taken from us, our artifacts and everything destroyed. And so many of us don't know what our original belief systems were. All our very important ancestral areas have been fenced off into national parks. They've been made like hotels, private game reserves, and World Heritage sites. So we can't even go back to those places and connect with ancestors. We've got to pay park fees, or we don't have access to very important places that for African people are very, very important places. I also wonder whether we are in a way trying to go back to that. Some instinctual thing is pulling us back to what we know, the Christianity and Hinduism and Islam, and that doesn't sit right with us. If you speak to a lot of religious people, they do still practice some form of traditional cultural beliefs, but nobody can actually say what it is. If this is maybe seeping into Christianity, where people are thinking, well, maybe this is what we used to do before we were enslaved, and we don't really know. And I'm just worried that that's why it's so extreme in Africa and not in other countries. It's getting less and less and more here, because we've reached a stage where we as people as well, there's like a huge awakening among people at the moment, and people are searching for something because they're not getting the answers that they think from religion. And this is causing them to, maybe as people start leaving the church, and like you said, because they try and stay relevant, people start maybe going back to natural belief systems and ancestral, you relying on wisdom and ancestral knowledge. The pastors in that have possibly said, but hold on, we can't get rid of people. So they maybe started introducing things that definitely aren't in the Bible, the Christian Bible that I know. So it's an interesting sort of theory how I look at it, and I just wonder, where does it end? Where does it end? Because we are now getting further and further and further away from who we are as African people because of this Western religion that's been forced on us. We are now making our own very dangerous version of something because we don't actually know what we used to really believe. And we don't have places that we can go to connect, and we don't have our artifacts, and we don't have people that we can speak to because generations and generations have been enslaved and taken off this continent. And it's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. And I do feel a lot of bitterness sometimes when I think that after all the damage that was done on our continent, we were left with religion and everybody just buggered off. And now they're all fine because they're all atheists, secular, and got themselves sorted. But we have been left with this absolute disaster. Every single day of our lives, it is affecting every single aspect of society for the absolute worst. And then you think, well, that's obviously been allowed for a reason as well. And it's very scary when you talk about 11-year-old girls who are having babies in that, because you know that even 10, 20 years ago, those girls would have gone right through school and we had such a high literacy rate in Zimbabwe for so long. For me to see the difference from an 11-year-old fully literate Zimbabwean girls who have got a drive to finish and go to university and do well in their lives, to now being sort of subjected to, well, they're going to have a baby, start having children and get married. It's a sign of a society being dragged back into the dark ages, and religion is dragging. It's all over. I see it in West Africa as well, with the Islamic thing, with 12-year-old girl that's trying to marry, and start having a family then as well. What it's actually doing is that it's stunting the education of our children. So we've got the schools and we've got all of the means in place to have a really well-educated continent. Intellectually, I'm not talking about internally, like your emotional intelligence and that, but like we as Africans have this thing that other people don't. It's just a knowledge of stuff. It's not to do anything you can learn in a university. But what I'm saying is that if I look at the number of people in Uganda as well, the number of children that are out of school, and the fact that you had a 2-year break there, Kato, as well, was unheard of anywhere in the world. And then the girls that fell pregnant couldn't go back to school. And then when the parents do take the kids back to school, the school fees are too high for the average family to afford. And then the children are just left and they just become uneducated. And I see this happening in so many of our countries. We are actually raising uneducated children that aren't going to fight back to government and say, we're not okay with this, we want something better, because they won't know any better, because they're uneducated and half illiterate. It's really shocking, but that's what I see happening.
Thank you very much, Lynda, and thank you very much, Chaku. I'm going to make a little addition there. We have 30 minutes to go, but I'm enjoying every minute. We have already done 1 hour, and I'm still enjoying everything that is being shared here. I think I learned quite a lot from Chaku, especially from the Zimbabwean experience. And this is it. Chaku helped us to bring in the Zimbabwean experience, then married with South Africa, then married with Philippines. Now that was so rich. I want to just add a few things right from what you said. I was making some notes here. And I won't even talk about Uganda mainly. But what I picked from what you said are a few things. One, the type of education we get in Africa corrupts us. It drafts our minds. It drafts. You know, a draft. It makes us too tall, regardless of being, too short, regardless of being tall. The education we get right now, I have a WhatsApp group of barristers, advocates in Uganda, a group of lawyers where I belong. They're about 60. And we talk about laws in Uganda, cases and all that. But right now, I'm the only atheist on the group, But you can imagine when you have professional lawyers who believe in miracles, who believe in prayers before they go to handle cases, Now, if someone who is educated cannot reason between or beyond mythology, and this person has a degree, not one, maybe two, this person has a postgraduate. Actually, this person is a practicing advocate. But this person still believes in a virgin birth. There is a problem. Because
a big problem.
How are you going to be sure that this person won't be able to promote superstitions before the court of law? How are you sure that this person won't be able to say no to vaccination, say no to scientific advancement in this area? And remember, being a lawyer, I'm just giving my own profession. Being a lawyer, this person is respected. The same as an engineer, maybe as a chemist or an economist. Anyone educated in Africa is respected. A teacher is respected. A nurse like my mother is respected. Now, the quality of education we have got has promoted more of the Western regions, that people think that actually we never had our own religion. Some people actually think it like that. But I want to correct that kind of misnomer, that kind of misinformation, that actually we had our own religions, as you have put it, Taku, as Lynda has put it. Yes, they were not perfect, but they never found us in the darkness. And I've been always telling people that how come that we are able to reject our own religions, but we can't reject foreign religions? How come that we're able to say that ours were bad, but theirs were good? And up to now, those who brought us their Christianity and Islam and Buddhism and all that are rejecting their own version of religion. There are more secular people in Europe than Christians in Europe. The trend is growing even bigger in the US. Many people are becoming secularists, many people are becoming humanists or non-believers as such. How come that those who brought these foreign religions actually are abandoning them, yet for us, we are embracing them more. It means, as Kato has said, the problem is partly in education.
Definitely.
Our education system cements that indoctrination, that we don't reason beyond. You'll find a professor who tells their students to go and pray before they go and do an exam. Now, what does prayer have to do with my passing an exam? All of us have passed our exams here, Taku, Lynda, me, and so many other people, without saying a single prayer. I've not said a prayer in so many years, but I've never failed an exam. And all of us have excelled. But why should a professor of science, of law, of whatever, tell their students to go and pray? So the impact is psychological, if I'm to analyze it. The impact of religion is more inside our small brains there, that it has clogged them. We no longer reason beyond what we are being fed. That's why you see that conspiracies are normally finding fertile ground in Africa more. Superstitions, they'll always find their grounds more. So when you look at Africa, as Takwa said, with the exception of Zambia, I'm on a group of Zambian people, and I think 99% of those Zambians, I'm not a Zambian, but I'm a group where Zambians are. They put me there simply to observe. Right now, I'm mad against homosexuals. And when you follow that group, you will even see that actually they are witch hunting innocent people. And I've been asking myself, I don't talk on their group, I'm just observing. I've been asking myself, the energy this president of Zambia, the ministers and MPs are putting in witch hunting homosexuals, if they are putting that energy in fighting illiteracy in their country, in building schools, in building proper roads, they'll be far away. But the destruction in Africa we have is that we are measuring in non-issues. And as Ataka said, Africa had the same people, because these are natural things. Being a homosexual, for example, is part of nature. But people don't want to read even their own history to find out that actually they had kings who were elected, because this is nature. A white man cannot teach me how to love. A white man cannot teach me how to make a woman pregnant. It's just natural. That even if you got a boy and a girl and locked them in a room for 10 years, 20 years, you will see a child coming out. Because no one needs to teach them how to make love, how to have sex. Something natural comes out. So there's no way I'm going to say that these people don't actually appreciate these things. But why do they remain so hateful? Because the education they have made them believe that whatever the Bible says is correct. And you cannot question it. And everything that contrary to the Bible is wrong. This is how we are getting problems in Nigeria, for example. And lastly, look at Uganda. There are people who still believe in traditional religions, by the way. Let us forget about even Christianity. When Tak was talking about a 12-year-old or 11-year-old getting married, that's not Christianity in my view. That's not Christianity teaching them that, I believe. That must be traditional kind of religions. So when you are making an assessment, you also need to look at the tradition religion and the impact they are making. That a man is going to be happy to marry a virgin. And yesterday I was reading about a culture in Zimbabwe or Zambia, you correct me, or South Africa, I think, where there are virgin certificates being given to girls. They are virgin testing. You know, you go and test a girl that virgin tests. It was so awkward. And the girls are given certificates. And this is part of culture. And you may trace it as part of religion, because as Kato said rightly so, the religion and culture are interlinked. They go hand in hand. And basically what Islam is a culture partly of the Arabs. what Christianity is a culture partly of the Arabs who brought us this Christianity, and the Romans who actually improved on it. So in my conclusion, I think going forward for Africa, we need more of secular education. We need more of secular schools. We need more of secular broadcasting networks. Like Itak was rightly said, so you are given a chance to feature on a radio program. And believe you me, whenever you feature, people are going to love more to listen to a different voice.
Exactly, something different, Joe.
Because they have been fed on the same thread of lies for years. The first time I appeared on a national TV and I said, I don't believe in God. The first time I appeared on a major TV in Uganda, it's called NTV. It's a Kenyan TV, covers East Africa, but it has a branch in Uganda, Kenyan Broadcasting Farm. It's called NTV in Uganda and NTV in Kenya. When I featured on NTV for the first time, the program was aired 21 times. This one program,
wow, 21 times, hey?
Was repeated 21 times. Why? Because people kept on asking for it.
Amazing.
People kept on saying, bring back the other guy who talked about religion. They brought the episode. They never brought me back to talk about the same subject, but they played it back over and over. So I can appreciate your talk when you say you had about 16 or 12 episodes on that radio program, and people liked it. But see, because we cannot control the narrative, the fans are going to say it's damaging. We cannot continue giving them airplay. It is a danger to our audience. Is awakening up our people. So as a way forward for now, we need to think about having these programs right here more and more. And if money can allow us in future, have our own TV programs, maybe our own television sets, maybe our own radio stations. I mean, things that can talk a different language from the normal.
Exactly.
It's the only way we are going to awaken up our people. And I want to thank you, Taku. Finally, Taku is an author. That's very important to say. Maybe next time when you host you, we need to look at the book we have written, give it more publicity, and actually have a thing. That's the only way we can be able to promote critical thinking to our people. So thank you so much, Lynda. Thank you so much, Taku. I'm going to hand back the mic to Lynda to moderate, and I'll be there to listen. But I've enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
It's been fascinating. It really has been. And it's so nice, like you say, Takutua, because you've lived in so many countries and now with being overseas, seeing religion from both sides. And that's how you learn so much as well. It's just by traveling for those who can travel. So I really, what you said there, Kato, as well, is one of the reasons we've got this platform is we want to try and start uniting with like-minded Africans across our continent to try and find solutions to common problems that we all face. It's all fine sitting here and talking about them and letting everyone know about the horrors that are going on under whatever we're discussing for the week. But we need to become a proactive group of people that work together. Despite the fact that some of us may be religious, like when we're working on cases like with the migrant labor and that, and the abuse of our people in the UAE, you know, I will never exclude myself from working with Christians and Muslims and any religion, because there are so few people that stand for good and are against corruption and the exploitation of people, that we have to all stand together, you know. And I think that as adults we need to, there seems to be something now where if you're godless, or there's immediately a barrier up and you're judged before you even get to know people. I think we need to see it, I liken it to like having your favorite sports team or something. You all support different teams, but you don't let it physically affect your relationship or what you're working on together in your daily life, in your work or your community or whatever. It's fine if you support Manchester United, but do it in your own home with your banners and your things and your songs and everything, with your family. Don't come and bring it into my home kind of thing. We need to start looking at religion like that, and I just think that we can't exclude whole groups just as we are godless. I also realized, and I saw that with my own mother growing up, is that as much as she loved me and she supported me in every single thing I ever did in my life, and she was not a stupid woman, she could never accept the fact that I had turned my back on God and I had no God. And it devastated her that I was going to be raising her grandchildren without a God. And I still remember that she said her biggest regret in life would be the fact that she would not have my sister and myself with her in the afterlife. Now, I even went with my mother to places like Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania and in places in Kenya and Tanzania, where we had very knowledgeable guides, and you've literally got evidence, and the state contained caves in South Africa of evolution and things. And she would still turn around and say, well, she can't explain it, but one day God will explain it, because he's so mysterious and works in mysterious ways, and we can't question him. Our minds aren't developed enough to know the things. She could never explain to me things like why there are dinosaurs in the Bible and that sort of thing. So what I'm saying is that I realized with my own mother, nothing I said or did, or the way that I lived my life still as an atheist, morally as a good person, that still went out and did community work and helped people. But she just put that down to me still having God in me somewhere. She was such a good person, but she credited her goodness her whole life to her God. And she never took credit for the fact that she was just a good person herself. It always had to be, she was doing God's work. She was serving him. She had to do this to get her rewards in heaven kind of thing. So I know that if I could not convince my own mother through everything, from losing my temper, from not speaking to her, from sitting down logically, from loving her, from taking her physically and showing her things, over years and years, I do believe that some people just do not have the capacity to see what we see. Just like some of us are really good runners, some of us aren't. I'm a good writer, but I'm hopeless at maths. Everyone is different, and I just think that some people just don't have maybe it's part of evolution or something. They just don't, so we've got to just accept them for who they are and understand. I would not spend an hour arguing with someone trying to convince them that there is no God, when I could be, say, spending an hour with people like you, where we can be sitting down and talking about solutions for issues that we've got. There's so few of us, and time is short, and I don't want to waste my energy on that. So I've made my peace now with religious people, and I don't get into arguments with them. That's also why I started drifting away from the atheist groups onto more of the humanist groups, because I found that I'm connected more with the humanists. A lot of atheists are still, they'll take up arms and kill if they have to or whatever, and they do, whereas as a humanist, you won't do that. And I came up with a way of explaining it to myself, is that all humanists are atheists by default, but all atheists are not humanists. And I've learned now to decipher between the two. And I know that I'm naturally drawn to the humanist people that would not do, like Takuzwa. I've never, in all the years I've known him, ever seen him screaming and swearing and demeaning and ripping someone to shreds because they're religious and he's trying to get his views across. Whereas I see that with a lot of atheists on a regular basis, and that never sat right with me, because I'm not like that in my everyday life. Even when people are really doing something that annoys me, or my kids might be to differ. But so I just think, well, why must I be doing that? Because also it's giving the godless a bad name as well. In the way, are we trying to create an image out there where people can see we're not baby sacrificing, blood drinking, sacrificing people. So that's why I think that, just going back to what I was saying, is that we have to all work together on common problems that we do have. And education, it's the answer to every single thing in Africa, is educating our youth, because that is when a child's mind is like a sponge, and there's so many things that you can learn that stay with you your entire life and form a foundation for you as a person. And this is where the danger is coming in with the indoctrination of religion. And it's absolutely, I don't think we even realize how devastating it is, and some of the techniques that have been used that we're not even aware of. I raised my children with no God. And when there came a stage where a school that my daughter had to go to was a Christian-based school. And she was, because my kids grew up in Tanzania, and, you know, we didn't have that religious aspect. And then, of course, here, moving to South Africa, they were Christian-based schools. I went to fetch her one Friday. It was a long weekend. I went to the car park, and she ran out, and she was absolutely stricken. Like, I thought she was sick, or she'd injured herself, like she'd fallen down and broken her leg or something. She just said, "Mommy, please." I mean, she was little. She was in grade 1. Can you get in the car, take me home? She was absolutely traumatized. And I asked her what had happened. They had an Easter assembly at the school. And she said a pastor from one of the churches had been a guest speaker. And he had come up and spoken to the children about a man who nailed his, you know, the whole nailed the man being nailed to the cross and dying and then coming back from the dead and everything. Now, at that age, she knew that death was final. I think we had a dog in it that had died. She, at that mindset, she knew that people died either from old age or like an accident, a car accident or something. She now had all these questions for me. Mom, do people kill other people? How can somebody do that to another person? What about the people that saw that he was in pain? Did they not help him? Then she started talking about, when we talk about the sacrifice of a father-son thing, what if my father sacrifices me? Will you ever sacrifice me? And she now suddenly, from thinking that people died in their sleep from old age or they had car accidents or something, she now had this in her mind, there's actually, people actually kill each other. She didn't know that at that age, at the age of like 6, 7 years old. And I just saw the damage that caused a child who'd been brought up with no religion, how she must have seen it, because now she was exposed to graphic violence, knowing that. But if I think to myself at that age, I was so into it. I probably heard the stories at Sunday school or church before I could even speak properly. I was never at all fazed by the crucifixion story. Sure, it was horrible, you know, but it wasn't something that traumatized me, like, say, if I'd watched a really violent movie at the age of 8 that I wouldn't have been allowed to watch. But it just shows the questions that she started having. She could not sleep that weekend. And she was like, Mommy, you promised me you're never going to kill me. How can a person sacrifice their child? Do people still do this today? The questions that she had. And then, but how can you kill somebody like that? I thought that people just died, or like they had a car accident and they were hit at high speed. So now she had all these things, and she suddenly starts realizing that the world is actually not a very nice place. And it's not the kind of thing that a 6-year-old should know. We won't let a 6-year-old child watch a graphically violent movie, but yet we allow them to read the Bible. And we are so indoctrinated, we don't see it. And I saw it so clearly that day with my daughter, how traumatized she was by it. And we also had an incident a couple of years later where, same thing you said, Kato, they had to pray before exams. And you must go home and you must pray tonight to your parents, and then you must pray and pray. And she was really torn because she said all her friends are doing it and she doesn't know what to do. Because they've been told by the teacher they must pray, and they pray in class, and she just sort of doesn't pray. And they've been told that they have to pray now for the exam. It was the first time she ever wrote proper exams. And I think it was maths, which wasn't a great subject for her. So I said to her, Logan, I said, you know what? I tell you what, let's not pray at all. And if you fail your exam because you haven't prayed, I promise you I won't be cross with you, even if you have to rewrite the year or whatever. Because I said to her, what you put in is what you give out. You can't rely on an excuse of prayer. And she was so nervous that, you know, at that age when you're trying to fit in with the crowd and everything, that her friends were going to pass and she was going to fail. And she passed it. And funnily enough, one of the girls in the class who was very religious and had prayed throughout failed. And I think for my daughter, that was the turning point where she actually realized that I'm saying a fear that was put into a little girl who is now thinking, because like you also said, Kakudza, it's the teachers and it's the people who instill it in us in the schools. You
Lynda,
learn respect. Yes.
Lynda, we should be wrapping it up. We have 7 minutes to go.
7 minutes, yes.
I would make a prayer legally that Taku makes a conclusion, and then you wrap it up, Lynda. Taku, over to you.
Thank you.
What we're concluding with tonight? Because we are going to have you back anyway.
Definitely, really.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Something I caught on like to what both Kato and Lynda said in this about how we had our own religions. One thing I've also noticed about them, because like my mother's side of the family is from Mozambique, and in Mozambique the most dominant religion over there is still the African traditional religion. Like the Portuguese didn't force Christianity onto them, so they just kept their old religions. It's that like they're they are not monotheists. So every family has something different. Every family has its own ancestors. Yeah, they don't have a universal belief in an all-powerful God. So you find that because of that, they accept that people have different beliefs. They are more tolerant. So if you tell them that you don't have a religion or you're from a different religion, they'll be like, "Oh, that's awesome." You know, but then monotheism is different. Monotheism believes that my one God is the only God that rules all over them all. So monotheist that you have less tolerance, and yeah, that's another like difference I noticed in attitudes towards the anime and the monotheist.
That's a very good point.
I think that's what I wanted to make. Otherwise, like I think this has been an awesome discussion. I really learned a lot, and I was to share what I had to share. I look forward to be back on sometime, and yeah, this was amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was great.
We shall get you back, and again we shall talk about your book. Your book, Vehicle for Progress, is quite welcome on this platform. You get us your book cover. We can have some adverts for it running on the platform. You get in touch with Dennis, our IT person, and we can have your title of the book and then the cover of the book, so we can use it as an advert, so that next time we can also have a talk show on the literature which is coming out of Africa. So thank you so much, Taku, and over to you, Lynda. You are the guy who is closing the show in a way.
Thanks, yes. You know, we're all trying to look for answers and to come for solutions on that. And I just think that I am so big on promoting our African writers, because we don't have a lot of written books and that from our past. It's so important to support writers like the two of you as well with the books that you've published, because it's knowledge sharing from other countries, and you can see the similarities that we all have and issues that we've all been dealing with in other countries and not really speaking to each other about them. And I think it would be wonderful if we could look at some, like you spoke about, a radio show or a podcast or something, where we can start connecting with other African countries, like on a Saturday night, and you actually have a podcast with everyday people who've got questions, like you said, Kato, as well. And I know Zambia have got a lot of interesting people that also were looking at doing podcasting, one of the big organizations at some stage. And so will Liberia. Yeah. And I know they were talking about working together and broadcasting in each other's countries every alternative Saturday. Ghana as well have a lot of very interesting topics. And I just think that we need to look forward a way that we can actually become more inclusive of everybody, and just your everyday person who's just got questions as well, and give them a broad spectrum, because I think if people can see it's not just me in my country, it's happening everywhere. There's lots of people like me. I think we all know as godless people that what make us feel more comfortable and come out and really become ourselves is knowing you've got the support of other people that feel you're not the odd one out. Everyone, there's lots of people like you, so that's wonderful. So this is just so great, hearing these different viewpoints and just having nice, wonderful, inspiring conversations. And thank you, Takudra, it's been so great. I know there's so many topics that you can actually help us with and speak to us about with your knowledge and Qatar, and I just think it's super that we've all met on the platform tonight. So let's definitely do it again. And I think we're going to take the religion subject up next week. Again, we're going to discuss Nigeria. Nigeria's got quite a lot. I think it's going to be a full show just on Nigeria next week with speakers from Nigeria. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. I know most of our viewership is after the show in the week. And we have almost, I think, a third of the continent represented here now, and people watching and supporting on our group, which is phenomenal if you think of it, that a third of our continent is represented here by humanist leaders and forward-thinking people around Africa. So we need to have all our countries on board so we can start speaking and just taking up these things. So thank you so much to everyone. And if you want to join our private WhatsApp group, please just send us a message on our Facebook platform, Call to Activism. We also have a YouTube channel. Contact us through there, and then we just like to bet and people to come onto the group so that we don't get all the crazies out there coming in and slipping in. And so that's great. Thanks so much, everyone. Takuza, thanks so much. It's early hours of the morning there for you now, and I'm sure you're looking forward to going to sleep. Whereas for us, it's just sort of like 8, 9 o'clock. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you sacrificing your sleep to come and speak to us tonight. We really do.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kato. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Bye. Yeah.